statement and my epidemiology. Today I want to repeat it again regarding the epidemiology. The malaria was thought to be due to bad air previously. The mana is bad and area means air. But it is proposed that it is due to protozoal disease caused by the infection with the parasite of genus Plasmodium. It is transmitted to man by bite of an infected female anaphylaxis mosquito. Typical attack comprises three stages: cold stage, hot stage, and sweating stage. Am I audible to you? Hello?
Ma'am.
Hello?
Yes, ma'am.
Am I audible?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Okay. The clinical features vary from mild to severe or complicated depending upon the species. Okay. The malaria topic is an important topic. You may get an SC question, commonly asked in the Viva, etc. And also you will have a statistical problem in the malaria also. So the complications are depend upon the species of the parasite, immunity of the patient, intensity of the infection, presence of malnutrition and other diseases. These are all the associated features to get the malaria severity. The febrile paroxysms occur with the definite intermittent periodicity of every third and fourth day. If you see the problem statement already, I told you the 3.3 billion people were at the risk of malaria. In 2010, it is estimated that 216 million people are cases of malaria worldwide. 91% were Plasmodium falciparum cases. 81% were in African regions, followed by Southeast Asian region, and 13% and East Mediterranean 5%. Malaria is accounted for estimated 6,55,000 deaths, which 91% were in Africa region only. That is in Southeast Asian region. If you see the estimated cause for specific mortality rate was in 2010, 19.6% the lack of our population was worldwide. In African region, it is 84.3%, and the Southeast Asian region 3%, and the East Mediterranean is 4.9%. And malaria still takes the life of an African child every minute. Already I told you in the last class, that's why I'm going on fastly regarding the statement, problem statement. You have, whenever you ask a question, especially the communicable disease or non-communicable, you have to write a problem statement to some extent. To some points, you have to write the problem statement. In the Southeastern Asian region, 4.4 billion people are living in 11 countries and 1.2 billion people are exposed to risk of malaria. Most of them whom live in India. However, in Southeast Asian region, they contributed only to 2.5 billion cases global burden of malaria. Of this, in India alone contributed 76% of cases. The cases are declining in Southeast Asian region in total, but falciparum cases are increasing. Malaria is a public health problem in several parts of the country. 27% of population lives in malarial high transmission area, that is more than one case per 1 lakh 1,000 population. And 58% are in a low transmission area, that is 0 to 1 case per 1,000 population. So the high power we have to divide it into high transmission area and the low transmission area. The incidence is highest in Arunachal Pradesh, and Orissa is reported largest number of deaths. As you see here, the number of cases in 2001, the number of cases is 2.09 million cases, but death rate is 1,005. Whereas in 2006, the 1.79 million cases, but death rate is 1,707. And 2009, 1.56 million cases, and the death rate is 1,144. So the graph shows the total number of malaria cases and the total number of Plasmodium filariae cases, Plasmodium falciparum cases, and the number of deaths. If you see the epidemiological types, tribal malaria, about 4.5 crore people which are living in the tribal population, contributing 50% of Plasmodium falciparum cases of the country. Infants and young children and pregnant women have been identified as high risk cases, and mobile tribal population who is engaged in forest related activities is also at high risk. And limited because why the mobile tribal population is very high means there will be limited infrastructure, lack of drugs as are responsible for high morbidity and mortality in tribal population. So in tribal population, tribal areas, there will be limited infrastructure, lack of drugs, which are responsible for high mortality and morbidity. In rural malaria, this is especially in the irrigated areas and the semi-arid areas and the arid plains of the Haryana, Punjab, and Western and UP, etc. In these areas, the malaria is moderate to low endemicity. Anaphylaxis pulsifacis is the main vector. Plasmodium vivax is a predominant during the lean period, and the Plasmodium falciparum during the periodic exacerbations. So health infrastructure in these areas is moderately developed. So here, the Anaphylaxis pulsifacis is the main vector for the rural malaria. Plasmodium vivax is the predominant during the lean period, and the Plasmodium falciparum is during the periodic exacerbations. So the malaria project areas is the temporary aggregation of the labors bringing different strains of malarial parasite. This population is non-immune, they are increased in man-mosquito contact, limited health facilities, carelessness associated with the chloroquine resistance. That is regarding the project areas. And the border malaria means the international and state borders have a high transmission. The reason is mixing of population and poor administrative control. So that is regarding the malaria in the project areas where there will be in project areas a temporary aggregation of the labors of different days which they have different strains of malaria parasite, and these population is non-immune. There are increased man-mosquito contact, limited health facilities, and carelessness associated with the chloroquine resistance. That is cause for project areas, that is malaria urban areas. And border areas, international and state borders have high transmission. The reason is mixing of population and poor administrative control. If it is a primary agent factor, that is a four distinct species of malarial parasite, Plasmodium vivax, which is the widest geographic distribution. 50% of infections are due to Plasmodium falciparum, and 4 to 8% is mixed infections of two, that is the vivax and the falciparum, and malaria contributes to less than 1% of infection. The largest focus of malaria is in Tumkur and Hassan in Karnataka districts. Oveli is mainly found in tropical Africa. In India, the Oveli species you cannot see. Most of the species you can see is only the Falciparum and the Vivax. In that, Vivax is the widest geographic distribution. 50% of infections are Falciparum, and malaria cases are only seen in Karnataka district. If you see the life history, parasite undergoes two cycles. One is human cycle and the mosquito cycle. Human cycle is the asexual cycle. Mosquito cycle is a sexual cycle. Mosquito is a defense host to the having the sexual cycle, and the man is the intermediate host. The extensive incubation period is 10 to 20 days. As you see, I have already last time I have told you regarding the life cycle of things. The reservoir of infection, man is the only reservoir of infection with the possible exceptions of the chimpanzees in West Africa. Child is epidemiologically better reservoir than the adult. The person must harbor both sexes of gametocytes. Gametocyte must be mature. Gametocyte must be viable. The number of gametocytes necessary for infection of mosquito is definitely not known, but 12 per cubic millimeter of blood. So the number of gametocytes, how many gametocytes is required for to infect the mosquito, definitely not known. It is only assumed that the 12 per cubic millimeter. So period of communicability, malaria is communicable as long as it is mature, viable, gametocytes exist in the circulating blood. Gametocytes are appear in the blood 4 to 5 days after the appearance of asexual parasite in cases of vivax. and 10 to 12 days period in falciparum. So the incubation period is 4 to 5 days for vivax, and for falciparum it is 10 to 12 days. Cancer cells are most numerous during early stage of infection. Ovarian and vivax malaria usually relapses more than 3 years after first attack. So if you see the repeated attacks, ovarian and vivax malaria is usually relapse more than 3 years after the first attack, whereas falciparum disappear in 1 to 2 years, whereas malaria cases passes for 40 years or more with the asymptomatic parasitemia. If you see the host factor affects all ages, but newborns have considerable resistance to falciparum. You please remember the newborns are resistant to falciparum. Sex, it affects male and female due to, especially the male is more compared to female due to outdoor activities. Race, individual with the sickle cell trait have milder illness with the falciparum. Individuals with Duffy negative RBCs are resistant to vivax infection. So you have to remember this point. Sickle cell triads have milder illness with falciparum, whereas Duffy negative RBCs resistant to vivax infection. The pregnancy, it increases the risk of malaria, and the socioeconomic development of the housing have inverse relationship with the malaria. Migration of the population and the occupation, etc. Malaria is closely related to agricultural workers and the human habits. Immunity status of the population plays an important role. Immunity acquired only after repeated exposures over several years to malaria. So, immunity status of population play an important role. The immunity acquired only after repeated exposures for several years, and thus in endemic areas, a state of collective immunity becomes established slowly. Active immunity is species specific, and environmental factors. Seasons, it is seasonal disease with maximum prevalence of July to November, and optimum temperature for malarial parasite is 20 to 30 degrees. And humidity, especially the relative humidity of at least 60% is necessary to live normal lifespan of mosquito. So rainfall provides the opportunity for breeding of mosquito, thus it increases the density. High altitude protects from malaria. Man-made malaria means man-created garden pools, irrigation channels, engineering projects, which helps in breeding. And also the malaria is needed to such the human undertaking is called as a man-made malaria. So the vectors for the malaria, there are 45 species of Anopheles mosquitoes in India, but all 45 species are not vectors for prime importance in transmission of malaria. The vectors of the prime importance are Anaphyllus pulchritis, Anaphyllus vulgaris, Anaphyllus stephensi, Anaphyllus philippinensis, and Anaphyllus sundaicus, and Anaphyllus minimus and Anaphyllus maculatus. These are the vectors of the major importance are Anaphyllus stephensi in urban areas and Anaphyllus pulchritis in rural areas. So if you see the vectors for the malaria, it must be present in adequate density. In case of Anaphyllus pulchritis, high density is required, whereas in case of Anaphyllus frontalis, low density would suffice. So last one, the vector must live at least 10 to 12 days after an infective blood meal. That is more important. So that's why we have to reduce the life of the mosquito. So the vector must live at least 10 to 12 days after an infective blood meal. She, the mosquito had. The distribution of vectors, Anopheles species is widely distributed and is the principal vector in the rural malaria. And Annapolis Stephenson is the primary urban sector. Annapolis Fluitalis is the vector in the hill areas and foothill areas. Annapolis Minimus and Annapolis Nilpes and Philippines and Annapolis Didus are the vectors in the northeast area. Annapolis Sundaicus is the restricted to Andaman and Nicobar Islands. And Anaphylaxis, annulirus and Anaphylaxis are especially secondary vectors with a wide distribution of the cases. So one year the PG examination, they asked the distribution of vectors for the malaria in the depends upon the areas. The vectors of the malaria, the choice of the host mosquito prefers a human blood, but some are animal blood. Human blood fed in case of Anaphylaxis precipitasis vary from 2 to 8%, 80%, and the Anaphylaxis puritalis is highly anthrophilic. The resting habits, endophily means rest in the window, indoors and the walls. Exophily means rest in outdoors. Vectors of the malaria breeding habits, some breeds in the moving water, that is Anaphylaxis fluvidalis. Some breeds in blackish water, that is Sundacus, and well cisterns, fountains, and overhead tanks are Anaphylaxis stephensi. And the biting time, most of the vectors, including Anaphylaxis species, start biting soon after the dusk. The vectorial capacity, combined effect of vector density, its susceptibility to infection, its lifespan, and the probability of feeding on the man. These are the vectorial capacity, which is who also has the resistance to the insecticides. The mode of transmission is transmitted with the bite of an infected female Anaphylaxis mosquito accidentally by transfusion of malarial positive blood. So the transfusion from malarial positive blood, if transmitted, the person may get malaria. And the drug and congenital infection of the newborn from an infected mother may also occur, but it is rare. So the mode of transmission is by bite of an infected female Anaphylaxis mosquito. Second one is the transmission of the blood transfusion of the positive mother positive blood, sharing of the needles among the drug addicts, and the congenital infection from mother to newborn. Incubation period is it is 12 days for falciparum malaria and 14 days for vivax, 17 days for ovale, and 28 days for malaria. And the clinical features, if we see, the typical attacks consist of three stages: cold stage, hot stage, and sweating stage. After the typical attack of fever subsides, the patient feels relieved. The paroxysms of the fever coincides with the development of parasites in the RBCs and the release into the bloodstream. The febrile paroxysms occur at a definite periodicity on third and fourth day, depending upon species. Falciparum has a tendency of development of delirium, jaundice, and anemia. The fever in the falciparum is irregular initially before classical 48-hour periodicity is established. Symptoms in the vivax are mild, regularly divided into cold and hot stage. So, in fever and falciparum malaria, it is irregular initially before the classical 48-hour periodicity is established, whereas in vivax it is mild, regularly divided into cold and hot stage. The symptoms in ovale are milder than the vivax and ceases after a few paroxysms, even if not treated. Symptoms of malaria resemble vivax, but periodicity is 72 hours rather than 48 hours. Okay? In vivax, it is 48 hours, whereas in malaria, it is 72 hours. The complications of falciparum malaria are cerebral malaria, acute renal failure, liver damage, dehydration, collapse, and anemia. Complications by other species are anemia, hepatosplenomegaly, herpes, and renal complications. Diagnosis: the microscopic examination, demonstration of parasite in the peripheral flat. Two types of blood films are taken, that is the thick film and the thin film. Thick film is for searching for the parasites, thin film is for identification of the species. And serological test, the malaria fluorescent antibody test usually becomes positive 2 weeks or more after the primary infection. to determine whether the person has had a malaria in the past or not. That is one of the importance regarding the serological test. A rapid diagnosis test, that is the RDT. Malaria is a rapid diagnosis test, sometimes called as the dipsticks test. It is associated diagnosis for the malaria, providing the evidence of the presence of malarial parasite in the human blood. RDT is an alternative to diagnose the diagnosis based on the clinical grounds or the microscopy, particularly where good quality of microscopic services cannot be readily provided. We can do it RDT. It is a rapid test. We can easily diagnose if the first patient is having the typical signs and symptoms of malaria. That is hot stage, cold stage, and sweating stage, etc. The malaria RDT detects the specific antigen, that is a protein that is produced by the malarial parasite, that are present in the blood of an infected or recently infected individual. Some RDTs can detect only one species, that is a Plasmodium falciparum. Some also detect other species of that is Plasmodium vivax malaria and the malaria. So blood for the test is commonly obtained from the finger prick. By doing the finger prick, we can take the blood and we can do the dipstick test. The measurement of malaria in pre-eradication era. The magnitude of the malaria is measured by clinically diagnosed cases. The classical measurements are depends upon the spleen rate, average number of enlarged spleen, parasite rate, parasite density index, infant parasite rate. So to measure the malaria, we should have the measurements spleen rate, average and index, and infant parasite rate. Percentage of the children between 2 to 10 years showing enlarged spleen. Average enlarged spleen denoting average size of enlarged spleen. Parasite rate means percentage of children between 2 to 10 years showing the malarial parasite in their bloodstream. Parasite density index means the average degree of parasitemia in the sample of well-defined group of population. That is called parasite density index. Infant parasite rate means percentage of infant showing malarial parasite in their blood film. Proportion case rate means number of cases diagnosed as a clinical malaria for every 100 patients attending hospitals. So the measurements are they are commonly asked even in the short notes. What are the measurements of the malaria? You have to write spleen rate, averaged enlarged spleen rate, parasite density index, infant parasite rate, proportional case rate. That is number of cases diagnosed as a clinical malaria for every 1,000 for every 100 patients who are attending the hospital. The patients who are attending in the hospital with the fever cases, those who test positive for the malaria, diagnosed for the malaria cases. Current microscopic diagnosis is the main method of diagnosis. The parameters for use currently are sometimes they may ask in the short notes what are the parameters used for malaria? That is annual parasite incidence rate, annual blood examination rate, annual falciparum incidence rate, slide positivity rate, slide falciparum rate. These are the parameters that are used in the malaria. Annual parasite incidence rate, annual blood examination rate, annual falciparum incidence rate, slide positivity rate, slide falciparum rate. So epidemiological indices, annual parasite incidence rate means total number of parasites, total number of positive sites for the parasite by population under surveillance into 1,000. That is annual parasite incidence rate. You may ask in the statistical examination if you give a problem and you have to write the number of positive for the parasite by population under surveillance into 1,000. Uh, Whereas annual blood examination rate means number of slides examined in a year by population under surveillance into 100. So smears examined in a year by population under surveillance into 100. Annual falciparum incidence rate means total positive falciparum cases by population under surveillance into 1000. And slide positivity rate means total number of positive cases by total number of slides examined into 100. Slide falciparum rate means total number of positive for falciparum plus plasmodium falciparum by total slides examined into 100. Plasmodium falciparum percentage means total positive for plasmodium falciparum by total positive for malaria parasite into 100. These are the epidemiological indices. So sometimes in examination they may ask the epidemiological indices, malarial epidemiological indices, so as a short terms. So this is the yeah, map showing the indicators for the malaria parasites in India. The vector indices. Sometimes they ask in the what are the vector indices for the malaria? That is human blood index. Proportional freshly fed female anopheles whose stomach contains the human blood. That is called human blood index. Proportion of freshly fed female anopheles mosquito whose stomach contains human blood. Sporozoite rate means percentage of female anopheles mosquito with sporozoites in the salivary gland. Mosquito density means number of mosquitoes per man hour catch. Anopheles bites per day per person. Inoculation rate means man dosing rate into infective sporozoite rate. Regarding the prevention and control of the malaria. As you know, the history of malaria you might have studied in the microbiology in 1898. Ross, a British army doctor who established the parasite's life cycle and awarded a Nobel Prize for the in medicine in 1902. This shows the we fight malaria. Why? 1.8 billion people, that is 40% of world population, live in malaria area. Okay, the transmission occurs in 100 countries, most of throughout the Africa, Asia, and Latin America, and certain Caribbean districts. Malaria results in a human resource of the wastage and is a setback for economic growth. So, as I told already, the burden for the malaria, especially in the Southeast Asian region, is more common. Same. The strategies for the control and eradication of malaria. That is, the strategies first management of malaria cases and active intervention of malaria measures. Management of malaria cases. That is, the case detection and disease control strategies using a chemotherapy. So we have divided into high risk areas and the low risk areas. High risk areas is preventive treatment for all suspected malaria cases. That is, presumptive treatment is first day tablet chloroquine 10 milligrams per kg body weight and trimethoprim 0.75 milligrams per kg body weight. And the second day chloroquine 10 milligrams per kg body weight. Third day the 5 milligrams per kg body weight chloroquine. In radical treatment for multiple confirmation cases, Plasmodium vivax tablet Primaquine 0.25 milligrams per kg body weight, Plasmodium falciparum, no further treatment in chloroquine resistant Plasmodium falciparum cases. Chloroquine resistant Plasmodium falciparum cases, you have to give single dose of 35 milligrams per kg body weight of sulfaline or sulfadoxine or 1.25 milligrams of pyrimidine and tablet Primaquine 0.75 milligrams per kg body weight. For low risk areas, chloroquine and Primaquine is helpful. Severe and complicated cases, quinine, artemisinin derivatives like artemisinin, artesunate, or artemether, artemether, etc. Mass drug administration in highly endemic areas, that is, annual parasite incidence is more than 5 per thousand population, along with the anti-mosquito measurements. And here, regarding the activity, the contra indicates children below 5 years are the contra indicated for activity. Chemoprophylaxis, drugs that are used for chemoprophylaxis are chloroquine, Praguanil, sulfadoxine plus pyrimethamine, sulfaline plus pyrimethamine, mefloquine, quinine, doxycycline, and haloperidol. And the special recommendations are for those who are travelers from non-endemic areas to endemic areas, that is, those who are of the soldiers, police, and the labor forces, those who are traveling from non-endemic to endemic areas, and a pregnant woman in areas where transmission is very intense, causing anemia and low birth weight, and it should begin a week before the arrival in the malarious area and continue for 4 to 6 weeks after leaving the malaria area. So that is the importance of those who are traveling from non-endemic areas to endemic area. They should give. It should be begin before 1 week. The treatment should be given as a chemoprophylaxis. The drug should be given 1 week before entering into the endemic area, and it should be continued for 4 to 6 weeks after leaving the area. And active intervention measures are stratification of the problem and the vector control strategy. Strategies in the problem means you have to divide it into areas with annual parasite incidence is less than 1, 2, and annual parasite incidence rate is more than 2. That is, we have to measure, we have to see the vector control measures, anti-adult measures, and anti-larval measures. Anti-adult measures means residual spray, DDT, malathion, and penetrione. DDT, malathion, and penetrione are the residual sprays, whereas space application are pesticides in the form of fog or mist, ultra low volume pesticide dispersion, and outdoor space sprays. Okay, pesticides are in the form of fog or mist, which is ultra low volume pesticide dispersion and outdoor sprays. So individual protection means repellents protecting clothing, bed nets, mosquito coils, screening of the windows, etc. Anti-larval measures are oiling on the standing of the water, dusting them with Paris green, chemicals or modern larvicide with the low toxicity. These are the anti-larval measures. Oiling on the standing water, dusting them with the Paris green or chemicals or modern larvicide. And the source of reduction means drainage or filling, deepening or flushing, management of water levels, changing the salt content of the water, and the intermittent irrigation. These are the indications of the source reduction. And integrated control, integrated means combination of all bioenvironmental, personal protection measures, etc. The malaria vaccine, of course, asexual blood stage vaccine is to lower the morbidity and mortality. The vaccines are to reduce the transmission and arresting the development in a mosquito. That is, the vaccines are to reduce the transmission by arresting the development in the mosquito. So, Plasmodium falciparum vaccine is in clinical trials in USA and Africa, and that is the synthetic cocktail vaccine for Plasmodium falciparum, and SPF 66 has been tested in South America and Africa and Southeast Asia. SPF 66, it is formulated as a peptide alum. The combination was selected on the basis of its ability to protect the monkeys from the infection. The National Anti-Malarial Program, that is the NAP. In National Malaria Control Program was launched in 1953. The incidence is declined 75 million. They have declined. The cases were reduced from 75 million cases to 2 million cases from 1953 to 1958. National Malaria Eradication Program was launched in 1958. It is divided into preparatory, attack and consolidation and maintenance phase. And the modified plan of operation is a revised strategy was put in to operation from April 1977 to review the situation as resurgence of malaria has grown to epidemic proportions. So if you see the milestones of the malaria program, it was started in 1946 with the DDT, 53 National Malaria Control Program was started, 58 National Malaria Control Program went to National Malaria Eradication Program. And lastly, in 2000, there will be National Malaria Eradication Program, National Anti-Malaria Program, NAMP was started. In 1977, India starts a modified plan of operation. it is in 1965, re-emergence of malaria. In 1976, it is the peak of malaria cases. If you see the National Anti-Malaria Program. So here, the modified plan of operation, so that sometimes they may answer as a short notes, but the modified plan of operation, don't be confused with any other thing. The modified plan of operation means in malaria only. The objects are to prevent the death due to malaria, to reduce the malaria morbidity, to maintain the agricultural and industrial production, to consolidate the gains so far achieved. Those are the objects. First of all, to prevent deaths due to malaria. Second one is reduce the morbidity. Third one is maintain the agricultural and industrial production. And the fourth one is the consolidate the gains so far achieved. And the reclassification of the areas with the API annual parasite incidence is more than 2 telegraph for the spray operations. And the areas with the less more than 2, that is first spraying with the DDT, Malaria, and anthrax, and the entomological assistant by security cases, and the surveillance, active surveillance and passive surveillance, and the treatment of cases. So there are, if the annual parasite incidence is more than 2, spraying, entomological assessment, surveillance, and treatment of cases. Spraying with the DDT, entomological assessment by the susceptibility of the test, and the surveillance active on the passive surveillance and treatment of cases. If the areas with less than API is less than 2, focal spraying, surveillance carried out every fortnight. Treatment is detected cases should be receiving radical treatment. Follow-up is blood smears and follow-up in positive cases on completion of radical treatment and treatment at monthly interval for up to 12 months. So after giving the radical treatment, every month it should be followed to be taken. And epidemiological investigations by mass survey. Drug distribution centers and the fever treatment reports, that is, drug policy for malarial treatment is under the National Anti-Malarial Program. Any fever case in endemic areas during the transmission season without any other obvious cause may be considered as malaria. So, any fever case, if you are doing the active surveillance and the passive surveillance, active surveillance means we have to visit each and every house and we have to inquire whether any person in the family are having a fever. Any fever in the case, we have to give him a prophylactic drug, take blood smear for the, and then look for the species. If it is positive, we have to do radical treatment. Drug resistant causes are the prevalent in the countries, but chloroquine is still the safe and effective and cheap anti-malarial drug and is simple to be administered. So the chloroquine is the best drug, though it is in some areas it is resistant to some of the parasites are there, resistant to chloroquine. Still, the chloroquine is the simple and the safest drug. The best approach in the malaria treatment is diagnosis and the treatment on the same day. So if there is any fever cases, take the blood smears, give prophylactic drug like a chloroquine, and look for the species. If it is positive, give radical treatment. That is only the way of treating cases of the malaria. And the urban malaria scheme, the methodology is anti-larval methods and drug treatment. It includes both urban areas with more than 50,000 population and a slight positive rate 5% and above, and the Plasmodium falciparum containment and the research and health education. These are all the steps for the moderate plan of operation and reorganization. And administrative boundaries are set up with the division of areas into zones. So, district malaria officer and assistant malaria officer and lab technicians are the administrative roles, multi-purpose health worker and the lab service and the malaria workers. And the surveillance, active surveillance and passive surveillance. Active surveillance and means visiting house to house. Passive surveillance, those who are patients comes to you in the OP with the fever cases, take the blood smears, look for the pass. That is the passive surveillance. The parameters of the surveillance, annual falsified incidence rate, annual blood examination rate, annual falsified incidence rate, slide positivity rate, and the slide falsified rate. So I think you will agree it is easier and necessary to keep men healthy than the doctor to cure them. So environmental sanitation is very, very important to prevent malaria. So the malaria control through primary health centers in 1999, National Malaria Eradication Program was renamed as National Anti-Malaria Program. Enhanced Anti-Malaria Control Project was launched in 1997, September 30th, and spread over 5 years. The components of the strengthened PSCs are early case detection and treatment, selective vector control and personal protection, like insecticide treated mosquito nets, epidemic planning and rapid response, intersectoral coordination, in the institutional management capabilities, and the use of languorous fish. So, and Government of India provided funds for it. It received 2 years extension up to 2005. Now it is already same. The goals for 10th 5-year plan is annual predation is should be over 10%. So we have to take more number of blood exam. We have to do more number of blood examination. Annual parasite incidence is 1.3 or less, and 25% reduction in mortality and morbidity by 2007, and 50% reduction in mortality and morbidity by 2010. So that is, these are the priorities they have given for the annual expenditure. That is global reduction in the malaria. They have given 1 billion, and whereas the remaining others are the more number of expenditure they have used in the worldwide rather than the reduction of the malaria. Whereas if you see that the alcohol drinks in the Europe is 105 billion, and narcotic drugs in the world is 400 billion, and military spending, of course, it is 780 billion. Whereas the safe water sanitation, it is 9 billion. But whereas the global drugs in the malaria is only 1 billion. So the malaria is a disease that is both preventable and curable. Let us pledge to eradicate the malaria. That is the Management Malaria Program. Thank you very much.